This is Ed Stetzer Live, and this and every Saturday we have the privilege of having great conversations, and we're going to do that again today. If you follow along, you actually know that I am far across the ocean. I'm actually in the UK. I've been here for a few weeks now, and so I've been trying to do some shows from the UK, which is always fun, and to kind of unpack things. We had Alistair McGrath last week, I think. We had Amy Orr-Ewing the week before that. So it's nice to have kind of a refreshing look from a set of eyes that are maybe outside of our cultural context. And in this case, I'm in the UK, but my guest is actually an American living in the UK. And it's actually, there's a fun connection. Those of you who know the way radio works, is, we're at about 250 outlets, terrestrial stations. They tell me the language that they use in the radio world. And some of those outlets are on other networks as well. There's Moody Radio, and then there's partners and affiliates. So, when I'm out in California, I listen on K-Wave, which is just, plays a few Moody Radio shows. And one of those partners for Saturday is the Faith Radio Network. And the Faith Radio Network is connected to the University of Northwestern, which we're going to talk about in just a minute because our guest is related to that as well. So let me introduce, I didn't even introduce myself. I'm the worst radio host ever. I'm Ed Stetzer. I'm the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. And I would say we're in La Mirada, but many of you saw the news that we also just have now pending accreditation approval. Phoenix Seminary will become part of our seminary as well, causing us to be a dual campus seminary, both in Phoenix, Arizona, and in Los Angeles. Of course, we have extension centers in New York City and Kyiv, Ukraine, and different places. We offer courses in San Diego and Seattle. Anyway, but that was news that kind of made a lot of news this week. So just to acknowledge that, in case you saw that as well. But for me, I have the privilege of on Saturday being your radio host. And so here on the Moody Radio Network and our partners and affiliates, so glad to do it. John Skrenik has actually written a book called Psalms 9100, a handbook on the Hebrew text. It's part of the Baylor Handbook of the Hebrew Bible. We're talking about those Psalms. As a matter of fact, what I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you to call in on Psalm 90 to 100. If you got a Bible, you can open that up. You can call in and kind of have a conversation with us about some of these texts. We're kind of excited about that. Our phone number is 877-548-3675, 877-548-3675. I want to talk about the Psalms, but tell me a little bit, like, what's it like to... You're at an evangelical college in the midst of Oxford University teaching biblical studies as an American. It's such to us, kind of a mysterious place and maybe a legendary place. What's it like to be like a tutor, like a professor at Oxford?
It's still a very mysterious place. I think it's mysterious to all of us, even after we've been here for years. They say no single person understands everything about the University of Oxford. So, yeah, still mysterious, but fun. I remember I used to kind of have to pinch myself going into work every day. It is a pretty cool place. A lot of history. But yeah, teaching at Wycliffe is amazing. We train future leaders in the church, in particular in the Church of England. So a lot of future priests come through Wycliffe Hall, but also just people who are both English and from abroad. We get a number of students from the States who have various ministries that they're going to go on to, and they come and get a really good training in theology and biblical studies here at Wycliffe. And when they come to us, they're already really well prepared. So, they're easy to teach because they're usually smarter than I am, and they're well behaved. So classroom management is not difficult. It's a lot of fun. Basically, I feel very lucky to be here doing this.
Love it, love it. I should remind people too that, sometimes people ask me, why do you promote? I actually do, social media stuff. You can come study here as an American. Most of my audience is American. And partly because you can. I mean, and again, the kind of
Hmm.
the path, if you're a Moody Bible Institute student or if a Bible University student, it's a different decision to go to something like Wycliffe Hall. We're all partners, and so you can, if you click through, go to edstetzerlive.com. You can click on John's information is there, but also you can click through and for John's information, go to Wycliffe. Come study for a year. You do a longer program as well. I mean, what an opportunity to come study at Oxford University. It's quite remarkable, and again, I'd love to teach you part of that as well. If you come to
Yeah.
my May
We,
class or my December class, mine are short courses where John goes the course of a semester. A little more like Oxford information, though. Well, first of all, I should tell you, John, I went to Cambridge for the first time. I'd never been to Cambridge my entire life. So I went to
Cambridge.
Cambridge and I
Oh.
was really disappointed to see. I think it's actually prettier than Oxford. So that was very
No. Oh.
disappointing to me
Oh.
personally. I
Oh.
know, but I mean,
Why'd you
Oxford's a better
even?
place, but it's a better place. It's so
We
one
don't
thing
talk
Oxford
about
has.
Cambridge, Ed. We don't talk
We
about
don't know, friends.
Cambridge.
Exactly, we call it the other place,
The
but
other place. Yeah.
but the Oxbridge approach to teaching, like
Mm.
if I come in and I study the Psalms with you, do you sit around and
Mm.
ask me questions, or how does it work?
Well, the classic Oxford model, which if you're in an undergraduate degree and you do a visiting semester with us, you get this. The classic Oxford model is you write a 3,000 word essay once a week, and you hand in your essay to the tutor, and then you sit and talk about it for an hour. It's you know kind of intense, though friendly, but it's you really dig in, and it's really quite a unique model of education that we do here at Oxford and at Cambridge. The and we also do some on our other course of study. It's a bit closer to the North American style of teaching, with classrooms and seminars and things like that. But we like to try to integrate that what we call the tutorial model. We have a lot of small group stuff, and we ask the students to do a lot, and then we don't grill them is the wrong word, but we expect a lot of them, and they deliver. And yeah, it's you're not just sitting there listening to people. It's very, yeah, very interactive, and yeah, you're on the hook.
Fascinating, fascinating. No, I guess we sort of know, we even call it a thing, that Oxbridge model. Okay, well,
Yeah.
Oxford's fascinating, so people will probably be interested in just hearing a little bit about that. But let's talk about the Psalms and your interest in
Okay.
the Psalms. Of course, you've got
Yeah.
this new. It's called this. It's Baylor Handbook on the Hebrew Text, Psalm 90 through 100. I'm guessing you're in a line of these as well, and you're specifically focusing on Psalms 90 to
Correct.
100. What of interest drew you specific, or did they assign that to you, or did you get to pick, or why
Ooh.
90 to 100?
Well, yeah. So at Oxford, when we teach, we have something called set texts. That means when people study the Old Testament, they're usually doing it with Hebrew, and they read texts in Hebrew, and then when they go and do their exams, they're expected to know those texts. And Psalms 90 through 100, they were the set text for a number of years when I was
Oh,
teaching.
wow.
So I had a lot of notes, and I thought, well, I had done a Baylor handbook with Robert Homestead on Esther that I published in 2015. So Esther is sort of my first love. But yeah, I had been teaching Psalms 90 through 100 for a few years, and I thought, look, if I'm going to do another one, why reinvent the wheel? I've been thinking about it a lot. So I guess it's practical. I mean, Psalms 90 through 100 specifically, as a corpus sort of makes sense. And we could talk about that. But in the
Well,
first
no,
instance,
tell me
it was
why it
practical.
makes sense. Because I always thought of towards like 90 to 106, but tell me why 90 to 100 makes
That's
sense.
right. So 90 to 106 is, book four of the Psalter,
Right.
which I mean, tell me if I need to zoom back, and I mean, we could talk about the five books of the
Let's do, I
Psalter as
did
well.
jump in. Let's talk about the Psalter is. And you're right. We should zoom back in. We shouldn't go to the
Oh,
specifics until we get to that. So tell us, I mean, what are these things called Psalms? What's a Psalter? And what's the
oh
structure?
gosh. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, self-evidently, when you look at these Psalms, they're a collection of texts. It's not that someone went and wrote Psalm 1 through Psalm 150 in that order, as a single person. Different people wrote these things. They were collected together and sort of put together. Um, and there's a question about sort of how purposeful that was. Some people think it was highly, highly purposeful, and the Psalms altogether almost tell a story, if you will. I don't really subscribe to that view. Um, Another point of view is that, it's not exactly accidental or haphazard, but sort of as time went on, things are just put onto the ends of the Psalter. I mean, there's a bit of that going on, but there is some intentionality. There is some sense around why things are put where they are. I mean, a really simple, interesting example is Psalms 3 through 9, I think it is, or Psalms 3 through 8. Um, they all refer to nighttime or sleeping or waking up or the morning. They all have this theme of sort of like, that period of time when you go to bed and then wake up, and and what you're doing during that time. Um, so there's a sort of theme that connects them, if you will. But one of the biggest sort of organizing things we see in the Psalms as a whole, Psalms 1 through 150, is at the end of a few of these Psalms, there's a there's a there's a blessing that sort of stands out from the psalm that it follows. It looks like it's something that's different, and it's separating one group of psalms from another group of psalms. So the end of Psalm 89, it ends with, "Blessed be the Lord forever, amen and amen." And that tells us that book 3 of the Psalms has finished, and there's 4 of these that split the Psalms into 5 books.
Okay, we're going to continue with this conversation in just a minute. We're going to take your calls as well. Let me remind you, you can call in at our number. It's 877 548 3675. We're talking about the Psalms. Maybe you got some comments about Psalm 90 through 100. 877 575. All right, we're back. Ed Stetzer Live. We had a little bit of drama and challenge in the first segment, but our technology, I think we're in better shape now. I'm actually over in the UK talking with John, who's actually also in the UK. John Skrenick has actually written a book called Psalms 9100, a handbook on the Hebrew text. It's part of the Baylor Handbook of the Hebrew Bible. We're talking about those Psalms. As a matter of fact, what I want to invite you to do is I want to invite you to call in on Psalm 90 to 100. If you got a Bible, you can open that up. You can call in and kind of have a conversation with us about some of these texts. We're kind of excited about that. Our phone number is 877 877 John, you were explaining to us how they're kind of books or sections of the Psalms and how Psalm 89 ended with this blessing. Keep telling us a little more about the structure, and then we'll see if we have some calls, or I might even just ask some questions. We'll see where it goes.
All right. Yeah, so you have these moments where these blessings, and they seem intentional, and the blessings seem to stand sort of outside of the individual poems that are there. They seem to have something to do with this larger collection of Psalms 1 through 150. So if you look in your translation, most translations will have, you know, alongside the headings that say Psalm 90, Psalm 91, Psalm 92, it will say book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 5. So the idea is that there are 5 books, and they're indicated by where these blessings are. And of course, people think probably there's 5 because it has something to do with the Pentateuch, the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. And we could talk about Psalm 1 and how that functions in setting up the Psalter in relationship to the Pentateuch, because it talks about the Torah. But anyways, when you get to Psalm 90, Psalm 89 ends with one of these blessings. And so Psalm 90 is at the beginning of another book of the Psalms, if you will. And Psalm 90 through Psalm 106 is book 4. It's the shortest book of the 5 books of the Psalms. So that is kind of one reason why I wanted to hone in on these particular Psalms. And I could have gone all the way to Psalm 106. The book would have been way too long. And Psalm 100 is sort of a natural stopping point because of another thing that will take a while to explain. But there's this theme of God, of the Lord being the king in these Psalms, in Psalms 93 through 100 in particular, although Psalms 90 through 92 sort of link in some ways. But that's really the thing that holds these together as a corpus. Probably these are written during the post-exilic or exilic era, when we don't have a Davidic king anymore. And so our focus, the people of God, their focus sort of shifts to God as being king instead of a son of David being king. And that's why you get all these references to the Lord being king in these Psalms. And someone decided, we'll put them all together because they all deal with a similar theme. Someone sort of intentionally maybe crafted this set of Psalms to look a certain way around the theme of the Lord being king.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it sort of brings together that kingship. And the nations appear a lot in Psalm 93 to 100 as well. How does that relate? Were they intended only for Israel? Is there kind of a global vision that's there? Talk to us a little bit about that.
That's a great question. I mean, if we're in the exilic or the post-exilic era, the the people of Israel are having to think a lot more about people from other nations, right? They're in much closer contact with them. And the idea is that God's reign is universal. It's not particular to just one people or just one place. It's universal in terms of people in the world, but also the actual, like, geographically all of the world. A lot of the references in these Psalms to the world is actually about the physical geographic world, not just the people that inhabit those places. And in fact, you get a lot of references to mountains and oceans and hills and rivers, and like those elements of creation, I guess, are important aspects of what it means for God to be king. Another thing we could dive deeper into if you wanted me to.
Well, I did. I think 90. People always, when you're the dean of a seminary, everyone assumes you're like a Bible scholar. And I have wonderful Bible scholars, and I look to them. I have Old Testament professors and more, and so but I mean, I have enough of a general idea. Like I think of 93 through 100 like a collection around
Yeah.
the Lord reign, the Yahweh reigns, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm,
So so you know I guess when you think of God as king, this keeps pointing as God as king. How do
mm.
we think about God's kingship from the way we typically think about earthly powers or
Yeah.
political power? I mean, it lays it out differently in the Psalms.
Yeah, okay. Good question. So I mean, there is sort of a like even in Genesis 1, humans being created in God's image, there is an idea in the ancient Near East that every people and every territory has its own god, and that god is sort of king of that place, and the human king is his image or his little statue that represents him or something like that. And so in Genesis 1, you see sort of a more universal, like Yahweh, God is the king of everything. It's not one particular place, but everything. And then the people that sort of represent him in reigning on earth are humans, humankind. And so in Psalms 93 through 100, I think it's very much that sort of more universal um, point of view. Um, for God to be king means um, it, it's universal, and it's really interesting its connection to creation. So if you look in Psalm 93, for example, Psalm 93:1 says, "The Lord is king. He's robed in majesty." You get this sort of vision of this glorious um, divine king. Then it says, "He established the world, it shall never be moved." And that kind of feels maybe like, okay, what does that have to do with anything? But in the ancient Near
Yeah.
East, there was a close connection between the God who ruled over a territory and like natural disasters. And if your God was just and reigned justly and fairly, then things were good, and like the very physical features of the world had order. And if your God was unjust and didn't rule justly, you'd have things like earthquakes and floods and bad stuff. So when you read through these Psalms, you often see this connection between God and his kingship and his justice and the like stability and reliability of the natural order in the world.
Interesting. I actually, I'm learning new things, which I like to learn new things
Oh,
as
good.
well. Um, I want to, Psalm 100 sort of ends your section, and I think, yeah, one of the. By the way, I love the fact that I hear you flipping around in your Bible. That makes me smile.
Sorry about
Um,
that.
so no, that's good. No, I like it. I like it. I mean, I memorized as a teenager because this was such a great, it was also a song. So, people often memorize things,
Right.
using song, but of course these Psalms would be that well. So Psalm 100 sort of ends your collection. You didn't go to Psalm 106 because you said it'd be too long, but why Psalm 100? What's particular about
Yeah.
Psalm 100? So short, but it's so powerful.
Psalm 100 doesn't say anything about the Lord being king, but what it does really clearly have is temple imagery. So it talks about worshiping him in his presence in verse 2. And then in verse 4, it's very clear: enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. The idea is that the reader, the audience, conjures up an image of God's temple. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that in history this psalm was used at the temple, but the audience is meant to imagine his temple and that situation. And the thing about a god is that the a god's temple in the ancient Near East was his palace. I mean, the word is the same in Hebrew: palace and temple. So when we think about the temple in ancient Israel, this is God's palace. And so Psalm 100 talks about the temple, and the idea of kingship is there, even though the word king is not used because of that connection.
All right, good. We're going to talk more with John and your calls as well. Let me remind you, we're focused on Psalm 90 to 100. You can give us a call, 877-548-3675. We're going to get right to the calls when we get back, 877-548-3675. Stay with us. All right, we're back. We are talking about the book of Psalms. We're talking about the book of Psalms with someone who teaches on this topic at Wycliffe Hall at Oxford University. John Skrenek is our guest. The book is Psalms 90 to 100, a handbook of the Hebrew Bible. And so we're talking about how these texts relate to one another, and we're taking your calls on Psalm 90 to 100. Get your Bible out. Kind of maybe got a question or a comment, call us at 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. We're going to go to Raj in Oklahoma. Raj, you're live on the air with your question or comment. Jump right in.
Yeah, I had a comment about Psalm 91, the first verse. I think the first couple sentences: He is my refuge and my fortress, and him I will trust. If I stopped right there, this is the promise God is, my refuge and my fortress. But in a relationship, it's two-way. What do I have to do? I will trust. And then the rest of the passage, it explains what happens when you trust him. He shall cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you shall take refuge. His truth, all these promises, it's just such a beautiful passage. The way it's scripted, it's so impactful. And then you can just apply that to what's going on in the world now. And that has been really, really impactful to me. And I just wanted to make that comment.
Oh, gosh. I read these Psalms, Raj, even as you read this, too. Thank you for your call, Raj, too. I mean, there's just these are so much a part of like my prayer life over the years. He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. Who hasn't cried out that? He is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. What's going on there? I mean, tell us more, unpack that more for us, John, this Psalm 91.
I think Raj put it pretty well. I mean, I think I agree totally with what he said. I mean,
Yeah.
Psalm 91 is definitely one of my favorite Psalms, if not my favorite Psalm. One of the things I love about Psalm 91 is one way I would put or restate what Raj said is that there are these shifts in voice in the Psalm. And sometimes Psalms will signal this to us, but sometimes they won't. It's actually a good thing to do when you're reading a Psalm is to think, wait a minute, if we went from talking about he to talking about you, is someone else talking here? Sometimes that can happen without it being explicitly flagged. And that's what happens in this Psalm. You have this person who needs protection, who's speaking in verses 1 to 2. And then in verse 3, someone else's voice comes in and addresses that person. He will deliver you. He'll cover you with his pinions, et cetera, et cetera. And then what's really lovely about this Psalm, actually I have a doctoral student working on this for one of her chapters and is focusing on this. What I love about this Psalm is that God's voice comes through in verse 14. I mean, it's very clear that this is what's happening, although it doesn't say, and then God says this. You can just tell in verse 14, those who love me, I will deliver. I will protect those who know my name. So you get God's voice coming through at the very end, and it's just really, really beautiful.
Love that. And Psalm 91 is, gosh, I mean, even, that's a great section you picked, Psalm 91, 90 to 100. There's some great Psalms in there, and I want to go back to them as well. But do me a favor. You mentioned earlier that Psalm 1 kind of connects this and frames this. I think you were talking about connecting to the Pentateuch and more the first 5 books of the Bible. Tell us
Yeah.
about that, and then we're going to go to some more calls. Penny, we're going to go to your call next as well. But let me also say that you can call in with your comments about Psalm 90 and 100 at 877-548-3675. You can talk about anything you want except Psalm 23, because that's what everyone wants to talk about. They all want to talk about Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is great, but we are focusing on 90 to 100. 877-548-3675. Give us a call. Penny, we're going to get to you in a minute, but John, tell us about Psalm 1 and how it frames this.
Yeah, so Psalm 1 is pretty universally accepted by scholars as being something that was written to stand at the beginning of the Psalter. So whereas most Psalms were written to stand alone as standalone pieces, Psalm 1 probably is made to kind of introduce the Psalms. There's some really cool ways that Psalm 1 and Psalm 2 connect to each other, because Psalm 2 is a very old psalm, but Psalm 1 uses some of the same language, kind of has this idea of people that are on God's side and people that are on the side of the wicked. But Psalm 1, another thing it does is that, well, those two sides, if you're on the side of the wicked, you're following their advice, you're walking in their path. But if you're on God's side, what you do in particular is you delight in his law and you meditate on his law. So some scholars have thought that the Psalter, Psalms 1 through 50, is like another law or something like that. But actually, I like the argument that Psalms are meditation on God's law. So you get 5 books to kind of reflect the 5 books of the law, and the Psalms are meant to be sort of the words that one uses when one meditates on the things that we read about in the Pentateuch.
Makes sense. Okay, good. All right, so let's go to Penny. Penny, we went from Oklahoma with Raj. Now we're going to Alabama with Penny. Penny, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Please comment on the Psalms as songs. For example, Psalm 92 is called a psalm or song for the Sabbath day.
Good, Penny. Good question as well. Are they all were they sung like we think of singing? Do we think of songs in different ways? Just kind of explain to us the use of psalms and how we would how the Hebrew people would engage them, how the Israelites would engage them.
That's a good question. We don't have 100% certainty on this, I don't think, not with every single psalm anyways. But it seems pretty clear that many of these psalms would have been sung, would have been used in worship in some way. I mean, we read about this in Chronicles. We read about the temple musicians, and we see them using psalms. What was that music? We don't know. We get some references to different instruments like harps and flutes and cymbals. It's hard to know exactly how they would have been used and how exactly they would have been set to music. It's also an interesting question of whether they would have even distinguished. I have another doctoral student who's working on this, whether they would have distinguished even the idea of poetry from the idea of song, if that makes sense. Poetry is just sort of, music in words, that sort of thing. So there are a lot of affinities with ancient Hebrew poetry, including the Psalms, with music, and they have this musicality to them. We don't have sheet music telling us what the tunes would have been, right? All we have are the words, but there's still something there that we can get at. But absolutely, it's absolutely the right to think of many of these psalms, anyways, as probably having been sung and set to music. But how exactly, we don't know. We can only guess.
Yeah, when I'm there, we go to chapel in the morning, and when you're using the prayer book, the Book of Common Prayer, you will often engage psalms, but you don't. I mean, sometimes we sing and we sing songs, and there've been a few times when the songs have been psalms that have set to what we would call modern music. But sometimes just read the psalms and read them back and forth. So I guess so should we assume that some of the psalms were literally somebody up there playing an instrument and they were singing along like we do hymns? Or would they be saying them like we do antiphonally back and forth? Or do we just not know? Well, you mentioned there's some instruments.
Yeah.
So how much do we know?
I'm hesitant to say too much. I think there's another option in there. There's sort of the musicality of saying these words, aloud antiphonally or something like that.
Right.
And then there's actually setting them to music. But then Also, there's some, there's canting something where you can not
Oh
use a
yeah, yeah, that's
normal
right.
spoken voice to say liturgy, right? So there's a sort of spectrum of things that can be done with them. I mean, yeah, we don't. Another thing we that should be said is that the way that music worked, we can't think of, say, classical Western music as being the sort of setting, or modern worship music or whatever. I mean, it would have sounded very foreign if we could hear what the music sounded like. It would likely sound very foreign to us. So I think it's great to set psalms to music and to sing psalms, etc. But we probably shouldn't think of it sounding exactly like what we would intuitively think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Okay, we're going to continue our conversation with John. We have one more segment. We're talking about his new book. He's got several books. They're all linked at edstetzerlive.com. His new book is on Psalms 90 to 100, a handbook on the Hebrew text from the Baylor Handbook of the Hebrew Bible. Would love to hear your calls around Psalm 90 to 100. Our phone number 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. As we continue our conversation in just a moment, stay with us. All right, we're back. We got one more segment. We're talking with John Skrenek about his book, Psalms 90 through 100, handbook on the Hebrew text. You can hear him flipping his pages in the background as we speak. Let's get ready for those Psalms. I like that, John. All right, so again, let me encourage you to, don't be afraid of considering coming to study at Oxford University or Wycliffe Hall. John, I mean, just invite all of my listeners to every single
Yes.
one of them right here.
Yes.
Why would they want to come
Yes.
study here? Tell us.
Oh, well, you learn a lot. It's amazing. It's fun. Great people. I mean, yes, each and every one of you is invited to come and study with me. I'd love to have you all.
It would be it's there's a certain irony though, because you're an American. There's not, most of the professors over here
People are
not.
sometimes
So it's like,
disappointed when I open my mouth and it's not a British accent.
is that
so.
funny? That's so great. It's so great. Well, but there's a reason you're here. You're obviously a smart guy, so we're excited about it. All right, let's go to Janie in Illinois. Janie, you're live on the air. Go ahead, jump in with your comment.
I want to swing back to Psalm 91 after listening to that gentleman. Yes. It reminded me of an experience. The Psalms came alive to me after the most tragic time of my life. I mean, they just spoke to me. I read that Psalm 91 was a prayer that the Civil War soldiers would recite. Recently, for the first time, I watched Saving Private Ryan, and there was a character on there who you would hear quote that psalm. But my own experience is I accidentally stabbed my hand one morning, and by the afternoon, I stabbed it. It didn't bleed, so I didn't clean it. Well, I lifted my dog, which is a wiener dog, up and out of my car all day. By 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock, that hand was swollen. I didn't go into the convenient care till the next morning. The doctor who was examining it, he said, when you examine it, do you hear that popping? I said, I don't examine it. It wouldn't mean a thing to me. He goes, I want to take an x-ray. He comes back into the room and he said, I've got bad news. We've got to put you in an ambulance right now. You've got necrotizing fasciitis. Most people have heard of the flesh-eating disease. That's what it was. I said, I can't. My wiener dog's out in the car. He goes, you've got to sign this release form. You've got to get to the hospital in Urbana, Champaign, right in Illini. And you've got to get there as quickly as you can. I'm going to have a hand surgeon and an arm surgeon waiting. I took my dog home, and I prayed that Psalm 91 all the way over there, and I had such peace. And when I got there,
Oh, you're kind of fading in and out, Janie. Okay. Janie, I think we kind of lost you there, but I think we got the gist of what you're saying as well. You know, John, and Jenny, thank you for your call. Sorry about the connection problems, but John, so many people find comfort in that
Mm,
psalm, and she mentioned the military reference to that as well. That's often called the
mm,
soldier's psalm as well.
mm.
So talk to us about why people like Janie might have found particular comfort in that psalm. Why, and why even as she mentioned, why soldiers might find comfort in it as well.
I mean, it's a beautiful psalm because it's so confident. You know, it lists all these really terrible things that can happen, and then it just states with confidence that you're going to be okay. Um, and in fact, people have suggested different original contexts for this psalm, that it was for a warrior going out to battle, or that it was for the king, that he'd be safe, or that this is for people experiencing a famine or being ill, or even people being attacked by evil spirits. And I think it's meant to be flexible like that. It lists all sorts of different things. Some things are clearly kind of war images, some things are famine images, etc. So it sort of covers the full range. I mean, not the full range, but it covers a wide range of really hard things that can happen in life, and just states very clearly with so much confidence that, God's going to look after you.
Love it. And Janie, I'm glad that the Lord walked through that journey with you as well. And thank you for your call. Sorry we lost you. Just that cell signal was kind of going in and out, so it was hard to hear. But anyway, glad for that helpful input as well. All right, we haven't talked about Psalm 96, and Psalm 96 is kind of is it wrong to say it's weird? I don't know. It's unusual. The Psalm. Well, you tell us why it's unusual. You're the scholar in this field, but there's kind of a fascinating thing there. Unpack a little bit what's going on with Psalm 96.
Yeah, what I find really interesting in Psalm 96 is that it appears two places in the Bible. We have some other psalms like that, but this one, Psalm 96 is used, or it appears in First Chronicles 16. Now, if any of you are familiar with the books of First and Second Chronicles, there's a lot of the things that happen in Chronicles come from Samuel and Kings, but also some different psalms appear in First Chronicles. And what I find really interesting is that Psalm 96, as it appears in First Chronicles 16, is slightly different. It's got some whole lines that are not there. And that's fascinating. So Psalm 96 in the Psalm says, "Sing to the Lord a new song, sing to the Lord all the earth, sing to the Lord, bless his name." But First Chronicles 16 says, "Sing to the Lord all the earth, tell of his salvation from day to day." It skips over the second and third line that we have in our Psalm 96. And some scholars think that's because whoever made Chronicles decided to change the psalm, but I actually think it's because there was an earlier version of the psalm from before it was included in the Psalter that the chronicler used. And so then we can, if you go back to this idea of the Lord reigning in Psalms 93 through 100, you can see that some of these additional lines that come into Psalm 96 help tie Psalm 96 into that collection. And in fact, they make Psalm 96 look a lot more like Psalm 98. Psalm 98 also has a lot of close parallels with Psalm 96, but they aren't there with what the text is in First Chronicles 16. So that probably sounds a bit complicated, but take 15 minutes and compare Psalm 96 to First Chronicles 16, 23 and following, and you'll notice some things. And some of those things that are different have to do with Psalm 98 if you bring that third text in as well.
Yeah, there's clearly a sense that they're like, well, maybe not clearly. Most scholars, and you among them, think that it's drawing from a prior text and then kind of put into each of those situations with the wording there. Is that I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. That's right. Again, you have to think of each of these psalms as an independent, not each, but most of the psalms were independent things before they were collected together in the book of Psalms. And so, yeah, Psalm 96 would have existed it wouldn't have been called Psalm 96. It wouldn't have had a number because it wasn't part of this collection, right? But it would have existed as a thing before it was included in the Psalter. And maybe the chronicler, the author of Chronicles, had access to that, not the version that ultimately ended up in the book of Psalms. So we have two versions of the same psalm, which I think is a bonus. Like, that's good. We get more.
More psalms are better. I think that's good as well. All right. So when you people, I mean, let's say, you're a Christian, you're going to church there in Oxford, and let's say that people are studying Psalm 90 to 100. What are some of the things that you would hope that they would draw from this about God, about creation, about kingship, and more? What are some of those kind of points you would say, man, I really would want you to get this from these 10 Psalms?
That's a good question. I mean, when you talk about God reigning, and we talked about that connection to creation and the importance of God being just, I think justice is really important in these Psalms. And one thing actually to point out that's really important about understanding these Psalms is that the word judge that comes up, whether as a verb, God is coming to judge the earth, or as a noun, God is judge, something like that, that has negative connotations in English, but in Hebrew, it was actually pretty synonymous with reigning or being king. If you were judge, that meant you were in charge of creating a just society and a just situation. It wasn't all punitive or even mostly punitive. It was about justice and curating and cultivating a context where there was justice and people were treated well. So I think that's a really important theme. And of course, ancient ideas of kingship were closely connected to that, not with creation, but also with people. A just king, his people would thrive. So that's a big theme in those Psalms that I would hope people would see and be able to apply to the contemporary world.
Brother, you've been a great guest. Appreciate you being on. Appreciate having the opportunity to visit with you when I'm over there teaching as well. And again, thanks to John, but also thanks to our listeners and for our callers. We appreciate you. Thanks to our Moody Radio team working there in Chicago. Remember, you can listen again at edstetzerlive.com.